Jesus in the Psalms, book by book. That's what we're doing today. I'm Richard Bewes, greeting you from Sandown Park on the edge of London, England. And with me here in Book by Book is, well, Stephen Lungo from Africa, from Harare. He's really team leader of the African enterprise work that's going on there. And then Paul Blackham, who is a theologian and Bible teacher here in Britain. And well, I think what we'll do, first of all, is to come straight to the psalm that we're going to look at today, Psalm 22. Oh my, it's the great psalm. I can't read all of it, but I'll read some of it. And the moment I start reading, you'll see that we're thinking about Jesus and the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, and am not silent. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the praise of Israel. In you our fathers put their trust. They trusted, and you delivered them. They cried to you, and were saved. In you they trusted, and were not disappointed. But I am a worm, and not a man, scorned by men, and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. And then it goes on later on, verse 15, my strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs have surrounded me. A band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. Well, we know exactly where we are. Anyone who's a bit of a Bible student, we feel very close to Calvary at this moment. And I'd like to ask my friends here to give us now some further help as we look at this psalm. So, Paul Blackham, let's start with you. What is hidden in that terrible cry at the beginning of Psalm 22? My God, why have you forsaken me?
Well, immediately we're aware that it's the Trinity at the cross. That if we're going to understand the depth of what happens at the cross, we have to understand what happens in the Trinity. That this is the one true God who is Father, Son and Holy Spirit. That's what his very being is. And yet at that time, we're here told that between the Father and the Son, the Father forsakes the Son. It just can't be, because that is what God is, the relationship between the Father, Son and Holy Spirit. Is this the end of God? On the cross, there's nothing that has ever happened from everlasting or ever will happen to everlasting, remotely so significant as this, that the very life of the living God, his very existence is almost called into question because the Father turns his face away from the Son. It just doesn't seem possible because this is the very life of God. So when we come to cross, and particularly to these sort of words, as Jesus allows us into what is going on between the Father and the Son in that time, because we never get more into it than in this psalm, I think we tremble. And I think the whole of creation trembled at the cross when this happened. And certainly we do.
Was it Alfred Edersheim of Jewish background who said a shudder ran through the universe?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the fact that God is so serious about sin, but so determined to find a way to forgive it and deal with it, that he's prepared to put a question mark over his own life and say the relationship with the Father and the Son, he will turn his face away. There's never that the love of God and his seriousness about sin is so powerfully shown to us as the fact that this is what is going on within the life of God at the cross.
This is the life of God in the cross. And Stephen Lungo, when we think about that, and I remember playing tennis with you at the Victoria Falls some years ago when we were practicing our backhands. Things like that.
My balls.
Do you remember? And you described to me then what it was like when you were a new believer, hardly knew a thing, illiterate, and yet you felt the power of Calvary, of Jesus' love was covering you. Because there was no one to do any follow-up at first after that mission, that tent. No one covering you, no one saying, let's sit down and read the Bible. You had nobody. How is it that Christ was looking after you then?
Well, the way it started was that when the police forgave me, the police officer gave me money to buy myself a Bible which I didn't know how to read. I only enjoyed flipping the pages.
And you said it smelled so nice.
Yes. And so I started witnessing in the marketplaces, in the buses, in the trains, and so forth. But then I went back to my own Presbyterian church where I said, I'm a child of God, I've been born again. And I expected that the church would hug me, love me, give me shelter. But they just said, God bless you. And I left. And that was the most painful thing in my life. I felt rejected by the church. And so I struggled in the places where I used to witness. And the people who were selling their produce in the marketplaces, they were the ones who helped me to feed me. But by God's grace, some months, almost a year in the streets, God, in his sense of humor, he brings not a black man, but a white person to adopt me in his home. And it was through this man that we struggled together for almost 15 years.
And then reading and all of that stuff,
Oh, man.
Study.
Yes, it was the struggle.
It seems that you were being covered wonderfully by the Lord, despite the sort of like when Saul first became Paul and became a Christian, the church was nervous of him.
That's right.
And it's so painful when that happens. Hey, Paul Blackham, sometimes people say things like this. This psalm was written by someone who was praying about their own suffering, and Jesus simply borrowed it on the cross. Now, what do you think about that?
Well, that's true, that sometimes, particularly if we're having evangelistic conversations as well, a person will say, well, this isn't anything, this is perhaps just David who was having a rough day.
Innocent man having a rough time.
Yeah, he's having a rough day and he wrote a song about it. Why get all excited? Well, I think it is worth us noting the detail of the psalm, that what is described in this psalm just doesn't apply to the life of David at all. Do you remember, I always remember when Peter's preaching on the day of Pentecost, and he turns to Psalm 16 on that day, and he says, look at that psalm of David. That didn't happen to David, so he couldn't have been writing about himself. That's the very argument that Peter uses to show that. And I think that's a great strategy that the apostle shows us. Look at the psalm. Could this have been about David? Well, it couldn't, could it? Because, we heard it. His hands and feet, were they pierced? No. What about his garments? Were they divided up by people? No. Was there ever a case where everybody was against him, like in those early verses? No. None of these, all these experiences. I mean, David had his own problems. He suffered and he had got enemies. So when he wrote this, he must have written it with tremendous empathy. And he must have loved to be able to share in, like, learning from Christ how to pray about his own sufferings. But nevertheless, these particular sufferings that are prophetically given by the Holy Spirit of Christ are not his. And I think it's important to point that out to when people might try to reject this psalm and dismiss these prophecies of Christ. Say, no, let's look at the details carefully. The details are very specific and accurate about Jesus on the cross.
And it's also interesting how Jesus himself talks about Psalm 22. How in Hebrews chapter 2, that bit there, when in verse 11, both the one who makes them holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers. And then he quotes from the psalm. He says, I will declare your name to my brothers in the presence of the congregation. I will sing your praises. I will put my trust in him. So Christ is quite clearly addressing himself and putting himself in that psalm.
Jesus says, it's like quoted. It doesn't even say, David said, and then Jesus found those words quite useful for his own situation. Jesus says. So the writer of the Hebrews just says, that psalm, that was Jesus speaking.
Yeah.
So the whole picture here, just portrays the cross.
Oh, yeah.
What happened to Christ when they sold his clothes, they exchanged everything, mockery.
Oh, yeah.
Verse 8, he trusts in the Lord. Let the Lord rescue him and let him deliver him. And that's exactly how they shouted at the cross.
They did. They jeered at him with those that is incredible that they were saying those things and didn't realize they were quoting from Psalm 22.
That's right.
It is amazing. This worm thing, when it says, I am a worm and not a man, when I was reading that, it was occurring to me that you might have something to say about that as well, Stephen, because how could such a person, the anointed one, say, I am a worm and not a man. And indeed, do other Christians who themselves walking in the footsteps of Christ, do we sometimes feel that as well, that we're put down a little bit and made to feel like that? What's your experience of the whole of the shame of the cross and the buffeting that we receive?
Well, calling himself a worm was like he lowered himself so low that through the suffering, God, they could insult him, he was God. They could beat him, spit on him, he was still God. And they could beat him, they could say all the things. The challenge was that when the Pontius Pilate asked him questions, he was silent. That puzzled him, because he expected to hear someone who would defend himself. He was a worm, humbled himself. And right through the cross, as they whipped him and fell down 3 times with the cross and went up to the cross, that humility as God humbled him so much, so low, to become like a worm. A worm is almost like it doesn't have bones, doesn't have muscles and so on, but he was God. It's really a picture of humility, that God could lower himself so low as God.
You've preached this in the gold mines and places like that, haven't you? What's the reaction to that when you preach the cross?
Well, the cross is always a stumbling block to those who don't believe, but it's so exciting when you see the power of the cross changing lives. Then that is one of the most exciting things. Because on the other hand, people may insult you, may say all sorts of things, and I've seen the power of cross that whenever I traveled or underground the mine, I've gone there, witnessed. And when I'm flying, the unfortunate person is the one who sits next to me. I share about the cross, and people have surrendered their lives to the Lord. And, you see the power of cross that when you sit down, and I remember flying from Toronto to Chicago, and here was this lady. As I shared about the cross of Jesus Christ, she was angry with me. And, as white people, when they get angry, they become red.
You go pink.
Yes. So, so she was really aggressive with me. But went through a heavy storm, and I said to her, if this thing crashes, are you ready to meet God? She said, please don't talk about, So I put in the cross and started speaking about the power of the cross, and it changed me. And this lady was in tears. And how we prayed together, and she accepted the Lord. Right above the clouds, the power of the cross.
Yeah, so underground in the gold mines or high above the clouds.
That's right.
It could happen both ways.
That's right.
Stephen. Hey, Paul, this then, as we look at the psalm, what does it teach us, this Psalm 22, about how Christ managed to keep going through the suffering of the cross?
Hebrews 12 verse 2 is an excellent verse, where how did he manage it to be like a worm, even though he's the living God? He tells us he kept the joy that was before him always in front of his mind and his heart, because that's the only way you can endure such suffering. And we actually see it in the very psalm. From verse 22, Psalm 22, verse 22, and onwards, he's actually turning his mind to the future and what's going to happen in the aftermath of the suffering that he's in. And he starts to actually praise in the terrible situation that he's in because of this joy that's ahead of him. And what is the joy? What is he looking forward to? It's a remarkable thing. I will declare your name to my brothers. In the congregation I will praise you. He's looking forward to sharing time of worship with us, the Christian church. He's looking, that's what the joy was. It wasn't just something like, oh, it would be nice to be on my own and have some peace and quiet at some time. Saying, I'm looking forward to being in a huge assembly of believers at the middle of that, leading them all in the worship of the Father. So even then he's thinking of the glory of the Father, even at that very time. That was the joy that he longed for. And then that's great for us, because when we're in the suffering, the thing is not to focus in on the suffering. It's to look ahead. We have got a future that is brighter than we can ever imagine. And we can follow the very example of Christ set for us here. Say, look at that, resurrection morning in the new creation. We'll all be gathered together in this tremendous act of praise with Jesus at the centre.
When you look at verse 29, Stephen, end of verse 29, all who go down to the dust will kneel before him. So there seems to be that element of those who go to death, but also in worship.
It'd be glorious. Wow, it'd be glorious. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship, and who go down to the dust will kneel before him. What a glorious time it will be.
It will be a glorious time, and that's where we're going to end off our little period of this program. But hoping that you have got the Bible with you there, maybe some study materials to do a bit further work on this strange mixture of suffering and glory and joy. The two go hand in hand all the way through the Bible. God bless you.